You're watching In the Studio here at Davis Media Access. I'm Autumn Labbe Renault. I want to give a little bit of context to the interview you're about to watch. In November 2021, the Davis Joint Unified School District Board of Trustees approved a comprehensive ethnic studies program. It's required under a new state law mandating the inclusion of such courses in all public schools. And a few months later, in January 2022, I interviewed local community member Alexandra Lee Job about her contributions towards that end and also her involvement with a San Francisco based organization called Eth-Noh-Tec and a presentation they do called Red Altar. This interview with Alex took place during a moment of rampant violence against Asian Americans, and I remember her saying how important and very needed Eth-Noh-Tec's work was. Earlier this year, in May of 2023, I attended a PAC screening of the Red Altar video organized by Davis nonprofit Davis Phoenix Coalition. There, I met Eth-Noh-Tec founders and artistic co-directors Nancy Wang and Robert Kikuchi-Yngojo. I watched the entire video of Red Altar and I stayed for the very lively Q&A. I'm really pleased today to welcome Nancy and Robert and to learn more about their work. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you. We're glad to be here. We're honored that you invited us.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's start by describing your organization, a nonprofit called Eth-Noh-Tec, and what you do. And how did you get started?
Okay.
Well, why don't we start with what Eth-Noh-Tec means and how you came upon that?
All right. So eth as an ETH is like the word ethnic or ethos. And ethnic is, of course, the cultural differences and distinctions. Eth as an ethos is the universal elements of art. And no, the middle syllable, N-O-H is a Japanese word, several words, kanno or noryuku, which means possibility. Or also the theater of phantoms and spirits. And tech comes from the Greek word texere, which means to weave. So we take all these things and weave it like a stir fry, and Eth-Noh-Tec came out of weaving the cultures east and west to create a new possibility.
And our mission is to create cultural bridges that bring people together through the art of storytelling.
And the stories we tell are both a large body of work that are traditional myths and folk tales, as well as contemporary Asian American stories.
Personal stories.
Right. And I want to encourage people to visit your website. It'll be put up on the screen at several points during the interview. But today we're really focusing on Red Altar, but you actually have a number of things going on. You've been around since 1981, correct? That's a real body of work there. And I guess let's talk about who is your audience. So my impression is that you started out doing presentations for schools and you've kind of grown in multiple directions. Who is your audience?
Oh, it's pretty broad based.
Yeah.
I mean, the audiences that are in schools and libraries, of course, family audiences, young people. We started in the Bay Area. So, of course, the diversity of the Bay Area and Northern California, all peoples. But also we have a history with the Asian American community, which is also pretty broad in the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California.
But there are also, once we began doing storytelling in 1985, there are storytelling festivals probably every week somewhere in the world. Storytelling is a very alive and popular festival that people go to in the thousands. And so we somehow immediately got featured in them. And so we began to perform around the world in storytelling festivals. So that means adults. So we go from little kids all the way up through 90s. You can be 90 years old and enjoy Eth-Noh-Tec stories.
And a lot of times people have hired us because they want to address, they want to address certain parts of their community. So, for example, we've done some of our programs have gone to Southeast Texas, where there was a large population of Vietnamese, the boat people. You've heard of that community down by Louisiana, Texas. So I performed stories of Vietnamese background. One time we were on a long road out in the ranch lands of Colorado, and to our surprise, when we stepped into that audience, they were Laotian kids, immigrants from Laos.
And there might just be one or two in like a school in Iowa. And those kids just perk up when they see us. They become very, first, they're a little afraid that we might embarrass them. But once we start
Mm,
performing and all the children are
mhm.
laughing and enjoying us, they begin to sit up differently. The other kids will go look and say, like that to them. And it just creates just a generalized good feeling amongst everybody that you can learn about yourself through stories about people who are not like yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And I imagine they feel seen as well in a way they might not
Absolutely.
have been before, right?
Right. Because,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so in talking about Red Altar, I want to go back to what I said about attending the presentation here in May of this year. And it used to be that you would present it live and then you created a video. And so the video, and you may still present it live, but the video is what we watched at the presentation. And I wanted to share two of my takeaways from that moment. The first was that I realized I was a junior in college before I even ever heard about the Chinese Exclusion Act. Okay, and I'm someone who came of age here in California. I used to live in the Monterey Bay region for a
Oh,
few years, and it was astonishing to realize that it took that long to even get a taste of that very pivotal point in American history and in California history. The second was there was a very lively Q&A after we watched the video together, and the kids were really participating, and they asked some great questions. One of my favorites was the young boy who said, "Why are there only two of you playing all the roles?" And Nancy, you had a great comeback for that, which I'll ask you to share. But it was, before we take a clip, uh, can you tell us a little bit about your experience interacting with your audience? What kinds of questions do you get? What kinds of feedback do you get about Red Altar?
oh, people say they've cried through it. They held the hands of someone next to them that didn't even know as they were crying at parts of it, but they were laughing, they were touched. They would say, "This, everyone's got to see this piece. It's so important." Um, but to answer what that little child, that I think maybe what 12-year, 13-year-old asked
Yeah,
about, why did we just use the two of us? We've always just been the two of us, and we've learned to take on different roles by just maybe changing a little bit of posture, a little bit of voice. But it's also very convenient because then we don't have to organize a whole bunch of different actors and make sure that they all can do it on this particular date at this particular
right,
school and get them airplane tickets to get to that school over in Pennsylvania. And plus, it costs very little to just have the two of us. Well, not little, but a lot less than having five or six people.
right.
There's just the two of us,
Yeah.
and it's so much easier.
Now, another anecdote I'd like to share is that as we performed this to adults, we were once at a conference of, I think, Episcopal
In New York?
clergy in New York area,
Mm.
and in the story we talk about the horrible hate crimes against Chinese Americans, the lynchings that happened, and in the crowd there was predominantly a large population of African Americans, and one gentleman said, "I never knew that Chinese Americans were also lynched. We thought it was just
Uh,
African Americans." So the idea that this kind of horrible outcome, it's happened so often to many groups throughout the United States history.
And I'd like to say that, you know, in most speeches, even when Obama did his inaugural speech, he talked about his brown brothers and his black brothers, but he didn't mention, Asian Americans or Native Americans. And
Mhm.
we are often left out of the conversation about uh, prejudice and racism. I just got something from Southern Poverty Law Center, and they were talking about, LGBT hate and Jewish hate,
Mhm.
Muslim
Mhm.
maybe, but they did not again talk about that we are also experienced a huge rise in, Asian American violence against us.
Right. Right. That was certainly borne out
I don't know
throughout
why
the
we're left out. I
pandemic.
think they
Well,
think that we're not people of color. We're the other white people.
yeah.
I've
Well, I
heard
think part
that
of it too,
before.
that there's a historical context for that. That for many decades, even previously into the earlier century, 1800s, there was a systematic exclusion of not just Chinese but Asians in general. Laws were passed.
Mhm.
There were people were not allowed to marry Asians. Anti-miscegenation laws. And so this, if this happened back in the other century. You keep building upon that, and then plus the fact that people think that these are foreigner faces, and yes, we have
Right.
immigrants that have accents, but as long as we have built upon this decades of discrimination, that it's no small wonder that people think, oh, they must be foreigners. We
Yeah,
don't need
go
to,
back where you came
yeah,
from.
we don't need to include them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where are you from? I know my friends tell me they hear that a lot. No, where are you actually from? I'm an
yeah,
American,
Yeah,
work with
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
And if you
before we
say the
take
truth, like I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, no, but no, where were you really from?
really
Then
from
I moved to Chicago. No, but no, where? And I finally learned to say, when I was younger and I would be offended, I would say, Sweden. I'm from Sweden. But, just to throw them off. But now I say, oh, you want to know where my ancestors came from. And
right,
then I say
right.
China. And then I say,
Yeah.
and where do your ancestors come from?
And if they say
Kansas? No, no, no.
they say
Before
before
that.
that, sometimes people
Right.
say, well, I
Fair
don't
fair
know.
is fair,
I was
right?
no, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
All right.
if they
Well,
say, "Well,
before
I'm,
we
157." Yeah. Go ahead.
Then
before
you're
we take a look at the
European.
clip, let's we've talked about the power of storytelling to affect positive change, to fill in our cultural gaps. Before we take a look at a clip from Red Altar, Nancy, can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what this story is about?
The story follows three generations of the same family. Starts with six teenagers who dared to cross the Pacific Ocean in a junk boat to America so that they could make more money to send back home and to start a new life. And those six teenagers ended up crashing in Carmel, California. But when they became well enough, because they were pretty sick from that whole experience, they saw that there was no fishing boats and they were fishermen. So they started the fishing industry in Monterey. So the story is about how through three generations, all the ways that they succeeded, all the ways that the Monterey and Carmel and Pacific Grove people passed laws against them. For example, they started the fishing industry, but they passed a law eventually that the Chinese could not fish during the day or on
Right.
shore. So, I mean, they were always trying to figure out a way to get rid of the Chinese. And so the story is really about, despite all that discrimination, that we actually succeeded. Or, for example, I wouldn't be here today because they were my great great grandparents who came to
Right.
America from China.
All right.
So
Let's take a
it's a
look at
celebration of, yeah, of persistence and courage that all immigrants have to have today or anytime.
let's take a look at a clip.
Guapo, these waters go all the way to China, don't they?
Yes, all the way.
Oh, I wish I were those waters.
China. So, May, you're sad?
I miss my family. I even miss my father, Baba's loud laugh and my mama's chicken feed and pig's feed and my brothers and sisters fighting over nothing. Don't you miss your family too?
Yes, I miss all of our family. All of them. Well, then maybe it's time.
We can go back to China?
No, maybe it's time we make our own.
You mean
I mean,
you think?
I think
You're sure?
I'm very sure.
Well, that illustrates the power and the longing for family, no matter if you can create it in a new place. I mean, I think that's the crux of the story too, is that family was the thing that carried your ancestors through all
Mm,
those hard successes and all those hardships. Um,
yeah.
what comes
Yeah.
next
Family is
for
very important.
yeah. What comes next for Eth-No-Tec? What's on, we're approaching the end of 2023 here, and I'm wondering what, the next year holds for you.
My next piece I'm premiering is about my grandfather. So this red altar is the family on my mother's side, and then there's my grandfather, which is my mother's father. And he was a very successful and very popular entrepreneur in Chicago. He had a restaurant that catered to the opera crowd, the
Carriage trade.
carriage trade, and he knew how to use the newspapers and the journalists to talk about what was coming up for him, or when his daughter was getting married, or when he got married, and how he had to fight to buy this mansion in a white neighborhood, and so I got a lot of information from that, but we always heard that he died by falling down the elevator shaft of his own restaurant, 4 floors down. But I
Oh,
remember also hearing that my grandmother said that she blamed her own brother, for pushing him. So I began to wonder, after hearing about other interesting information about what was going on around that time he died. I began to wonder if actually he was murdered. And
hmm.
so that's what the piece is about. It's called
So
Shadows and Secrets.
a tale of intrigue.
It's a mystery. Yes.
All
Real
right.
Yes. And I'm
intrigue.
going to
Well,
do it as a stage radio play. And
oh,
that
lovely.
is many. I'm going to have 6 other actors. So there we are.
In
All
radio
right.
play format.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
not
Well,
going to be just the 2 of us.
let's make sure we get your website up, because I want people to know where they can find you. When I visited your website a couple days ago, I saw that you have a spooky Halloween offering, and there's a lot of information about not only Red Altar, but the work you do, how to contact you, how to reach out to you for presentations and things like that. And I want to thank you both for joining me here today at Davis Media Access, and also just personally for using the power of storytelling to help fill in some of the gaps in my own education. I think that's a very important piece of the work you do, and I'm grateful for it. So thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn.